Chapter 1. It should have been an ordinary evening, just another quiet night in our apartment, the city lights spilling through the floor-to-ceiling windows, but nothing felt ordinary the moment I saw her again. Clara Whitmore, the woman who had once held the heart of my husband, Michael. I had heard stories of her, fragments from years ago, memories he had shared reluctantly, always careful not to linger. I had convinced myself that the past belonged to the past. But seeing her in person, standing in our building lobby with that effortless smile, it felt like a cold hand had reached into my chest and squeezed. She looked radiant, the kind of beauty that seemed effortless, a presence that drew attention without trying. And when Michael noticed her, I saw it, the hesitation, the brief pause, the fraction of a second where the confident, self-assured man I married softened. His eyes lingered on her just a moment too long, his shoulders subtly shifting as if recalculating a memory he had thought long buried. A sharp pang of fear shot through me, and I felt my pulse quicken. I had always believed in our love, in the life we had built together, but that tiny flicker of recognition made me question everything. I forced a smile, a polite tilt of my lips as he introduced us. "Clara, it's been a long time," he said, his tone warm but controlled. I noticed the subtle undercurrent of nostalgia in his voice, the hint of something he never let me hear before. My hands pressed against each other tightly in my lap, and my chest tightened with a sudden, overwhelming worry. Does he still care? I asked myself, but the question felt dangerous, almost forbidden. Later, when the lobby had emptied and the city outside had quieted into a soft hum, I replayed the encounter endlessly in my mind. Every glance, every small smile, every carefully measured word he spoke seemed to carry hidden weight. I tried to tell myself it meant nothing, that he was mine, that the years we had shared, the home we had built, mattered more than any memory from the past. But doubt is a stubborn intruder, and mine had taken root, gnawing at the edges of my certainty. That night, I stayed awake long past midnight, listening to the faint hum of the city below, feeling the tension in our apartment grow heavier with every quiet moment. I loved him with all my heart, yet the fear of losing him to someone who had once held a piece of him I could never reach was suffocating. I realized, in the darkness, that love alone might not be enough to protect us from the past. And I wondered, with a sinking certainty, whether this return, Clara's return, would be the beginning of a test I wasn't sure I could pass. Chapter 2. The days that followed Clara's unexpected return were unbearable. Every morning, I woke with a tightness in my chest, a gnawing worry that clung to me like a shadow. Michael moved through our apartment as he always did, calm, precise, effortlessly charming. But now, every word, every gesture seemed to carry hidden meaning. I tried to convince myself that he was the same man I had married, devoted and present, but the sight of Clara in his thoughts, or rather, the trace of her memory I could sense in him, planted seeds of doubt I couldn't ignore. It started with little things. A flicker of hesitation when he answered a call that I imagined was from her, a soft smile that seemed out of place, a subtle pause when I mentioned her name. I replayed the moments over and over in my mind, dissecting them for hidden meaning. Was he nostalgic? Was he still in love with her? Every question felt dangerous, yet impossible to silence. I found myself watching him closely, measuring his glances, searching for signs I wasn't sure I wanted to find. I noticed how he lingered on memories that belonged to the past, small stories he once shared with me about her, now suddenly seeming more vivid, more immediate. My stomach twisted every time he spoke of those days, not as if he missed her, but as if she existed somewhere in the corners of his mind, a ghost I could not touch or banish. I wanted to ask him directly, to demand the truth, but a part of me feared what I might hear. Fear had become a constant companion, whispering in my ear that I might be fighting for a love that was no longer entirely mine. My thoughts grew heavy, circling endlessly around the same question: does he still love her? I tried to reason with myself. He chose me. He married me. He built a life with me. And yet, the very fact that I had to convince myself of it only fed the uncertainty. I started avoiding his touch, pulling back in conversation, creating silent space between us in the hopes of protecting my heart. I told myself it was for him, for their reunion, for the happiness I feared he might still owe her. But deep down, I knew it was my fear speaking. The fear that our marriage, everything we had shared, could be undone by the simple presence of someone he had loved before me. By the end of the week, every encounter with him left me exhausted. The man I had adored for years now felt fragile, distant, almost unknowable. And yet, there was a strange longing intertwined with my fear. I loved him too much to leave, but I couldn't shake the sense that I might have to. The seeds of doubt had taken root, growing wild and insistent, whispering that sometimes love isn't enough to conquer memory, history, and the unexpected return of a past that refuses to stay buried. Chapter 3. By the third week after Clara's return, the apartment felt colder, emptier, as though the very air between Michael and me had shifted. I couldn't tell if it was him or me creating the distance, but every glance I gave him felt weighed down with suspicion, every smile forced and hollow. I loved him, had always loved him, but the seed of doubt had taken root, growing faster than I could control. The man I had trusted with my heart now seemed just beyond my reach, and the space between us stretched with every passing day. I stopped initiating conversations, stopped asking about his day, stopped sharing small moments that had once been our private language. I moved silently through the apartment, careful not to draw attention to my presence, as though I could vanish without him noticing, or worse, without him seeing the fear in my eyes. Each interaction became measured, precise, polite but distant. I was building walls, brick by brick, trying to protect my heart from the possibility that he still loved Clara more than me. At night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every encounter with Clara in my mind. I imagined them laughing together, sharing memories, reliving a past I could never touch. My chest ached with jealousy and fear, and I felt trapped between love and doubt. I wanted to confront him, to demand proof of his feelings, but my pride and insecurity held me back. What if the truth hurt more than silence? What if my worst fear was real? And Michael's heart still belonged to her, even if just in memory. Even in small moments, the tension was palpable. When he reached for me, I pulled away slightly, afraid to give him the comfort of my presence while my mind was a battlefield. When he spoke softly, asking about my day, I answered politely but kept my emotions tucked tightly inside. I felt like a stranger in my own marriage, a ghost haunting the life we had built together. I wanted him to reassure me, to say that I was enough, but the fear of hearing otherwise kept me from asking. The more I withdrew, the more I felt the distance grow. Each passing day added weight to the unspoken tension between us, and I realized that the love we had carefully nurtured was now at risk. The walls I built to protect myself were isolating both of us, and yet I felt powerless to tear them down. I loved him too much to let him go, and yet my fear whispered that leaving might be the only way to protect the life and heart we had built. By the end of the week, I knew a painful truth. Love alone wasn't enough to bridge the gap between fear and trust. The distance I had created was not just physical or emotional. It was a test, one I wasn't sure either of us could survive. And in the quiet of our apartment, I made the hardest decision of my life, believing that stepping away might give both of us the clarity and courage we so desperately needed. Chapter 4. The night I left was the quietest night of my life, yet it felt deafening in its intensity. The apartment that had once been our sanctuary now felt like a cage, filled with the unspoken words, stolen glances, and lingering doubts that Clara's return had stirred. I sat on the edge of our bed, staring at the faint glow of the city lights, heart pounding, hands trembling. Every instinct screamed at me to stay, to fight, to believe in the man I loved. But fear had taken root deep within me, and it whispered a cruel truth. Maybe he loved her more than he loved me. I packed my things silently, methodically, as though the act of folding clothes and tucking them neatly into my suitcase could somehow keep the tears at bay. I left behind the small notes he had written for me months ago, the photographs of our shared moments, and even the delicate scarf he had bought for me last winter. Each item I left felt like a shard of my heart being left behind, and I felt the ache of it with every step. Before leaving, I wrote a note. My handwriting was shaky, but I wanted him to understand, to know that my leaving wasn't a betrayal. It was love, painful though it was. I love you enough to let you go. I hope you find happiness, even if it's not with me. I slipped the note onto the kitchen counter, imagining him finding it later, imagining the look on his face as he read the words I could not bring myself to say aloud. I paused at the door, taking a final look around the apartment that had been ours, feeling a mixture of grief and resolve. The city outside seemed impossibly vast, a reminder that the world kept moving even when your heart felt frozen. With one last breath, I stepped into the night, suitcase in hand, leaving behind the warmth of our shared home for the cold unknown. The streets were quiet, almost empty, and I felt both liberated and hollow. I told myself this was an act of courage, a gift to both of us. I believed that by stepping away, I was giving him the chance to choose, to be honest with himself, to follow his heart wherever it led, even if that path didn't include me. I kept walking, head bowed, trying not to imagine him chasing after me, trying not to picture the possibility that this might be the night everything we had fought for could end. Yet even as I walked away, a part of me ached with the knowledge that love isn't measured by absence, and that sometimes, the hardest choice, leaving doesn't erase the feelings that bind two hearts. I didn't know if Michael would fight for me, or if he would let me go without a second thought. All I knew was that I couldn't stay, not with the shadow of his first love looming over us, and not with my own fear threatening to destroy everything we had built. As the night swallowed me in its quiet darkness, I felt the fragile, bittersweet truth settle over me. Sometimes, love means letting go, even when your heart is screaming to stay. And in that moment, I believed, truly believed, that leaving was the only way to protect the love we both deserved. Chapter 5. I had imagined so many scenarios during the days after I left, him running into Clara's arms, laughter that wasn't meant for me, a life I had been pushed out of. I had expected to feel heartbreak in every glance at a crowd, every passing couple, every sound of joy that seemed to echo what I had lost. But the reality was different, and it struck me in quiet, subtle ways that made my chest tighten with confusion and hope. From a distance, I watched him move through the routines of our life without me. At first, it was almost like he was empty, a shadow going through the motions, his expression distant and unsettled. And then I noticed it, the subtle signs, the moments that betrayed his heart. He wasn't laughing with her. He wasn't visiting her. He wasn't trying to reach for her hand or seek her attention. It was as if the world had gone dim, and only the space I had left behind held the light he couldn't live without. I spent long hours replaying the last conversations, the fleeting glances, the silence I had left between us. I realized with growing clarity that Michael's heart had never truly belonged to Clara anymore, if it ever had. The fleeting hesitations I had misread, the pauses I had mistaken for longing, were nothing but echoes of the past, shadows that I had allowed to grow larger in my mind. My fear, my insecurity, had made me see ghosts where there were none. The realization hit me like a storm, sudden and unstoppable. Every beat of my heart screamed at me to turn back, to undo the steps I had taken in haste and fear. I had left believing I was doing the right thing, sacrificing my happiness for his supposed desire. But the truth was far simpler and far more painful. He had never stopped loving me. Every choice, every hesitation, every quiet moment without me proved that he had only been waiting, in some unspoken, quiet way, for me to return. I felt a mix of relief and guilt, the two colliding inside me with dizzying force. Relief that my worst fear had been a lie, that love had not abandoned me. Guilt for having left, for having doubted him, for having believed a story that wasn't real. I wondered if he had felt the same pangs of regret, the same ache of absence, the same silent longing. And in that moment, I realized something crucial. Love isn't measured by fear or distance. It is measured by the heart's persistence, by the way it reaches for the person who belongs to it most, even in the quietest, darkest moments. As night fell, I made a decision. I couldn't stay away any longer. I couldn't let fear and doubt dictate the course of our love. Somewhere in the distance, he might be waiting, still searching for me in his own way. And I knew, finally, that if we were meant to be, the only path forward was to let him know I had realized the truth, that his heart had always been mine, and mine had never left him. Chapter 6. I had thought that leaving was the end, that stepping out into the night, suitcase in hand, would give him the clarity I feared he lacked and give me the distance I desperately needed. But I hadn't counted on the man I loved refusing to let me go. Michael found me that evening, standing under the soft glow of a street lamp, the city quiet around us as if the world itself had paused to watch our story unfold. He came running, the familiar precision in his movements replaced by raw urgency. His eyes locked onto mine, searching, desperate, as if every step toward me was an effort against some invisible force. Please, he called, voice trembling, catching in the cool night air. Don't walk away from us, don't walk away from me. My heart skipped a beat, caught between relief, fear, and longing. This wasn't the composed, controlled man I had lived with. It was him, unguarded, exposed, and utterly vulnerable. I froze, unsure whether to step back or close the distance between us. Every instinct screamed at me to protect my heart, to retreat from the storm of emotion radiating from him. And yet, his presence drew me forward, as if some invisible tether pulled me into his orbit. I don't love her, he said, almost pleading, every word a lifeline thrown across the distance I had created. I never did. You're the only one I've ever loved like this. You, his voice broke, and for a moment he simply reached for me, hand trembling slightly. Tears pricked my eyes, blurring the edges of the streetlights and the cityscape. I wanted to believe him, to step into his arms and finally feel the certainty I had been denied for weeks. But the memory of my fear, the pain of doubting him, still lingered like a shadow. How can I trust that? I whispered, voice shaking. How can I believe it when I thought you still loved her? He stopped just short of me, cupping my face in his hands, thumbs brushing against my cheeks. His gaze was unwavering, desperate, filled with a vulnerability he rarely allowed me to see. Because it's true, he said softly. Every thought, every heartbeat, every moment without you has reminded me of what matters most. It's always been you, not her, never her. You are my home and I won't let you walk away. Not now, not ever. His words sank into me, each one a promise, a lifeline, a confession that shattered the walls I had built around my heart. I felt the tension in my chest release, a long-held breath escaping as I let myself step closer. The warmth of his hands, the sincerity in his eyes, the undeniable truth in his voice, it broke through my doubt, my fear, my hesitation. For the first time since I left, I felt the possibility of a future without shadows, a love untainted by memory, regret, or fear. As the city lights flickered around us, I realized that leaving had been a test, but he had run after me. He had chosen me, just as I had chosen him, and in that shared moment of vulnerability and truth, I understood that love was not about leaving or staying. It was about finding each other again, no matter the distance, no matter the doubt. Chapter 7. After he found me, standing there under the quiet glow of the streetlights, the world seemed to shrink until it held only us. His hands were still on my face, his gaze fixed on mine with a desperation I had never seen before. I felt my pulse racing, my chest tightening, and for the first time in days, I let myself feel without fear. I could hear the earnestness in his thoughts even without words. I can't lose her. I won't. I swallowed hard, searching his eyes for the truth, needing proof that what he said was real. Why now? I whispered, voice trembling. Why do I have to find this out this way? I left because I thought you still loved her. My words spilled out, raw, unpolished, carrying the weeks of doubt, fear, and heartbreak I had buried deep inside. Michael's thumb brushed across my cheek, steadying me as though he could hold the chaos of my heart in his hands. Because it took losing you to understand what I've been feeling, he said softly, his voice shaking just slightly. Every day since you left, I realized that I've never stopped loving you. Every second away from you has been unbearable. Not Clara, never her. You've always been the one and you always will be. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting his words wash over me. The doubt that had gnawed at my heart felt like a distant memory, replaced with warmth, relief, and a fragile hope. But I needed more. I needed him to know the depth of the pain I had carried. Do you know what it felt like? I whispered, my voice breaking. To think the man I married, to think the man I love, might still be in love with someone else, to feel like my happiness didn't matter. He pulled me into his embrace then, holding me close, pressing his forehead to mine. I could feel the rapid thrum of his heartbeat against mine, a tangible echo of the love he was professing. I do, he said softly, almost a whisper. And I am so sorry that I ever made you feel that way. If I could take back a single moment of doubt or fear from your heart, I would. But I can't. What I can do is spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt my love again. I let out a shaky laugh, tears spilling down my cheeks, and clung to him. His thoughts were now clear, steady, and true. She is mine, always. I felt the barriers I had built crumble completely, replaced by a deep, abiding certainty. For the first time since Clara's return, I felt safe, cherished, and fully seen. In the quiet of that embrace, under the soft city lights, We spoke in whispers and confessions, unraveling the weeks of fear, doubt, and distance. Each word, each touch, each heartbeat brought us closer to the bond we had always shared, but which had been tested and strained. By the end of the night, I knew that love wasn't about perfection. It was about honesty, courage, and the willingness to fight for each other, even after fear had pulled us apart. Chapter 8. The morning after our streetlight confession, the city seemed brighter, almost impossibly alive, as if it too celebrated the shift in my heart. Michael and I walked side by side, our fingers entwined in a gesture that felt both new and familiar, like rediscovering a song we had once loved but forgotten. The tension, the fear, the unspoken doubts that had haunted me for weeks seemed to melt away with every step, leaving only a quiet, profound certainty. He had chosen me, and I had chosen him. We didn't need grand gestures or declarations. The simple act of being together was enough. I felt the weight of my suitcase in the corner of the room, a reminder of the distance I had created, and I knew I would never need it again. Our apartment, once filled with the cold echo of my absence, now hummed with life again, the warmth of shared space, of shared hearts, of a love that had endured fear and doubt. As we settled back into our routine, even the smallest moments became intimate milestones. Michael made coffee just the way I liked it, careful to not burn the foam this time, and I smiled, feeling the care behind the gesture. We laughed at old jokes, teasing each other over shared memories, and I realized that the laughter wasn't just for amusement. It was a balm, a way of reclaiming the joy we had almost lost. Later, we sat on the balcony, the city sprawling below us, lights flickering like stars scattered across the streets. He leaned back in his chair, hand brushing mine as we talked about everything and nothing. I could hear the honesty in his thoughts, the relief and love that pulsed beneath every word he spoke aloud. I will never let fear come between us again, he thought, and I could feel the promise in my own heart responding in kind. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to let go completely. I rested my head on his shoulder, feeling the rise and fall of his chest, the rhythm of a heartbeat that had never truly strayed. The shadows of Clara's memory, which had once haunted me, felt distant now, replaced by the living, breathing reality of the man I loved. He was here. He was mine, and I was ready to be entirely his. We spoke of the future, cautiously at first, acknowledging the fragility of the love we had rebuilt, but also embracing the certainty that it was worth every tear, every doubt, every moment of fear. Promises were made, not in grandiose declarations, but in the quiet understanding that we had faced the tests of our hearts and emerged stronger. As night fell and the city lights mirrored the stars above, I felt a profound sense of peace. The storm had passed, and in its wake, we found not only each other but a renewed trust, a deeper intimacy, and a love fortified by perseverance. In Michael's arms, I realized that reunion was more than a return. It was a beginning, a chance to rebuild what fear had nearly taken from us, and to step forward together into a future defined not by the past, but by the enduring strength of our hearts. Chapter 9. The night felt impossibly still, as if the city itself had slowed to watch us. Michael and I sat together on the balcony, our hands entwined, hearts beating in quiet sync. I could feel the tension of the past weeks, the fear, the doubt, the distance, dissolve in the warm glow of his presence. Every thought he sent my way, unguarded and honest, reaffirmed what I had come to realize. Our love had endured, stronger for the tests it had faced. He looked at me then, his eyes reflecting the city lights and something deeper, something I had almost forgotten existed, unwavering devotion. "I don't want to lose you again," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "Not for anything, not for anyone. I promise you, from this moment on, I will fight for us every day. No shadows from the past. No doubts, just you and me." I felt a lump in my throat, tears threatening to spill, because his words were not just promises. They were a mirror of the longing, regret, and love I had carried inside me. I leaned into him, pressing my forehead against his, letting the warmth of his body steady my own. "I promise," I said softly, "to trust you, to share my heart, to be here fully, no matter what comes our way." The sound of my own voice, trembling yet firm, felt like a release, a surrender to a love that had been tested and proven true. We talked late into the night, exchanging more than words, sharing thoughts, hopes, and the quiet vulnerabilities we had kept hidden from each other. I could feel the honesty radiating from him, a clarity that had been absent during the weeks of doubt. Every confession, every small revelation was like a brick being placed carefully in the foundation of our renewed life together. I felt him, truly, entirely, and I knew he felt me the same way. By the time the first hints of dawn crept across the skyline, our promises had taken shape, not in grand gestures, but in the shared understanding that love required presence, patience, and courage. We vowed to speak our hearts openly, to face challenges together, to never allow fear or misunderstanding to take us apart again. The bond between us was no longer fragile. It had been tempered in fire, tested in absence, and solidified in truth. As I rested my head on his shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, I realized that promise was more than words. It was a pact of the heart, a commitment to choose each other every day. We had faced shadows, fear, and past loves, and yet here we were, unbroken, ready to step forward as one. In that quiet moment, with the city slowly waking around us, I felt an overwhelming sense of certainty. No matter what the future held, we would face it together, anchored in love, trust, and the promise we had made beneath the stars. Chapter 10. The morning sunlight spilled through the curtains, warm and golden, washing over the room in a way that made the past weeks feel like a distant shadow. Michael was beside me, his hand resting over mine, his thumb brushing gently across my knuckles. The quiet rhythm of the morning, the faint hum of the city, the soft rustle of sheets, the steady beat of his heart, felt like a symphony I had longed for, a melody of peace, trust, and certainty. I looked at him and saw not only the man I had married, but the one who had fought for me, who had proven that love isn't just about passion or memory. It's about choice, courage, and devotion. Clara's return had shaken us, tested the boundaries of trust, and made me question everything I believed about us. But in the light of this morning, I realized that what we shared had endured far more than fear and doubt. It had grown stronger because of them. Michael leaned toward me, his gaze soft, filled with a quiet intensity that made my heart flutter. "I meant every word last night," he said. "Every promise, every thought, every heartbeat, it's yours always. You're my home, my heart, my everything. I don't want to spend another day without you knowing that." His voice carried the weight of truth, of vulnerability, and of love that had been tested and emerged unbroken. I smiled, letting the tension I had carried for weeks dissolve. "I know," I whispered. "And I meant every word of my promises, too. We've faced fear, shadows from the past, and doubts. But here we are, stronger together, and ready to face everything else that comes our way." The warmth of his hand on mine, the security of his presence, made me feel as though the world had finally aligned. As though every step we had taken, every misstep, every moment of doubt, had been leading us to this perfect clarity. We spent the morning wrapped in each other, talking about the future, laughing softly at small memories, and simply being present with the gift of each other's company. I felt the past weeks of fear, of uncertainty, slipping away, replaced by a profound sense of peace and certainty. This was our love, fully realized, not fragile, not tentative, but strong, honest, and unshakable. As the sun climbed higher, illuminating the city around us, I rested my head on his shoulder and let myself feel completely, without hesitation or doubt. Michael pressed a gentle kiss to my temple, a silent promise that this love, our love, would never be taken for granted again. In that moment, I understood the truest essence of happiness. It isn't about perfection, it isn't about avoiding mistakes or shadows. It's about choosing each other over and over, and trusting that the heart knows its way. And as I held him, feeling the steady beat of his heart against mine, I whispered, "We're home." "Yes," he murmured, his lips brushing mine in a kiss that sealed our journey. "We're home." The city around us continued its quiet awakening, but inside our apartment, inside our hearts, the world felt perfectly still. For the first time in weeks, I was certain, nothing, neither fear, doubt, nor past love, could ever pull us apart. We had found each other again, and this time there was nothing to lose. Only love, only us. The end.